All right, if I could ask one more time, if everyone would please mute, I'll allow you to unmute at the end for our question and answer. But first of all, I just want to once again welcome you. And today is our 5th Saturday, and we have our guest lecturer, Anita Butani, who I first have to just tell you how I met her, because I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking, you know, when you pursue your passion, when you are, you know, looking for all the things that really interest you, it's wonderful the people that you meet along the way. And a couple of years ago, when we were in lockdown, I joined a reflective writing class. You can find out more about that on Thinking Teachers website. I joined a reflective writing for teachers class. And then after my class finished, we all joined together and also formed a community of reflective practitioners. And I met Anita. And that's when our friendship first began to blossom. And then she started attending the language center, and she was just a faithful attendee, just participating and sharing. And then she became one of our tutors, and our friendship has really grown. And the way that she gives herself to people, not just in the language center, but the way that she gives herself, you probably read her bio, so I'm not going to take a lot of time in reading it. You do already know that she has her master's in clinical psychology, but she is one person who has taken that gift of trying to understand and help people inwardly and blended it with languages and communication. So I'm so excited to see what she has to say about all of that today. And so please joining me in welcoming Anita. And again, thank you all so much for coming. Anita, I'm going to turn it over to you and change the view to speaker. And please take over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Thank you for bestowing this honor on me, actually, to be able to share some of my thoughts and views, which were there very much hidden, but I never really explored it. So when Vicky, you offered me the opportunity to speak, I thought what best but to combine my love for language and my passion, the core passion that I have been pursuing, which is psychology. So let's dive into what we call psychology of English, or as I would say it in technical parlance, psycholinguistics. I do not promise to be able to give you a lot of information. It's just a skinny dip or just a footprint probably that we are looking at. And of course, it's a vast subject. So whatever I have, whatever I could glean, I'm just presenting to you in brief. And another disclaimer, I do not promise to know all the answers. So whatever I know, I will share, and I will also learn from you along the way. Before that, before I really begin, I'd like to thank both Dr. Neeraja and Vicky for bringing me to this spot. I have learned a lot thanks to the reflections that Neeraja introduced and the course that I've done with her, and for giving me, Vicky, and a lot of other friends that I've made along the way. These are treasures of a lifetime for me. So let's get into psycholinguistics. Let me share the screen. Psycholinguistics of language learning and teaching. Here we go. What is it that we understand about language? What is it about language? What is language literally? It's what we all know it as is that it's a combination of words that are strung together and put forward to communicate to others what we have in our mind. So is that all what language is about? And if that is what it is, are there any definitions that are there in talking about languages? There are plenty, but let's not get there. Let's actually move further and look at how we move forward. So when we talk about language, we all know that as we grow or when we are born, the first thing that we get to hear literally, that is the perception or an information that is fed to us, which is verbal as well as actions. So the first language that develops is our mother tongue, the native language, so to speak, or the dialect, the local dialect or the mother dialect that we have. So when we are born, we open our eyes. The first thing that happens is we have faces peering at us and cooing to us, saying words to us and trying to make us smile, maybe even touching us, maybe trying to touch our lips, maybe our cheeks, and then trying to voice out words. Do we really understand them at that time? I'm not very sure. Do we? Does anybody know? Would anybody like to say something? Anybody? No?
We understand emotions.
We understand emotions. And
we understand intentions.
how do we understand intentions when we are babies?
Well, the touch.
The
Through
touch.
our other senses, the smile, the touch, the smell of familiar things, then having been fed on being hungry, things like that. It's all through our senses.
Fantastic. So
maybe we get connected.
Yes.
We get connected through these small little touches
and also the familiarity of the person there, because those are the first people we see.
Right.
These are the people that we can really see them on a constant basis, and these are the faces then we start communicating with or recognizing that these are our familiar faces, and we know that our needs are looked after by them. So but then how does language also develop after that? What about the babbling, the cooing that starts? So we all know that at the age of 4 months, there's babbling before we really start speaking the language. So what happens in babbling? Is it really a production of or a reflection of what is said to us, or is it something that's innate? So let me give you an example. This is an instance which has actually happened with me. My niece, when she was born, at the age of 4 months probably, and before she turned 4 months old, I was on a regular basis communicating with her, cooing to her, babbling to her. And because I was her aunt, and we say bua in Hindi to aunt, which is dad's sister, literally, I used to constantly say, who am I? Who am I? Bua, bua, bua. I used to keep saying to her. And I got such a beautiful reward when at 4 months of age, she started her babbling. But the only thing that she said, whereas we know that children just say something which is illegible, some mumbling, some rambling, but it was, remember, it was for just 1 day. She started by saying, boo, 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 boo-ah, 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 and my joy knew no bounds. It's like, it was a revelation of sorts. such a heartfelt feeling, such a feeling that I cannot really explain entirely. But anyway, this basically is where our language really begins. One is the perception, and two is how we really start by talking illegibly first, and then, of course, legibly. This is about the first language. What about other languages? Because we know that as we learn those, as we finish the babbling and we start growing older, we start speaking our first words. There's one word language, and then two words, and then three words. And then we go on to making a string of sentences. Sometimes we make 2-word sentences when we are at a certain age. And then we try and make longer sentences. Sometimes it is without the grammatical content, which are only the consonants or the nouns or particular words said together. Milk, Jack, Jack milk, something like that, probably. That's what we say sometimes. But what about the second language? Because by the time we are 5, we are speaking nicely, proper. Sometimes we have long sentences that we speak. And then what about the second language?
So it could be because we meet friends at school or even our neighbors. No, we play with other children in the neighborhood.
Yes.
So maybe that way we pick up our second language.
We pick up our second language that way. And what about when teachers teach us?
Yes. So the language at school, the medium of instruction. Yes.
Yes. And when they actually teach us, have we ever noticed that they start by teaching us words? They ask us to communicate with each other because it is an addition to the first language, so to speak, because the first language is what is an acquired language. It is not taught to us, so to speak, because there's no grammar that is taught to us the way we teach when we teach a language. It is through trial and error or a series of repetitions of what is fed to us. And this probably is what the theorists say that is why it is an innate feature in humans that we learn. Speaking of humans, I was wondering, do animals talk? Do they have a language? Do they? I'm sure.
In my opinion, I think they do have a language.
They do have a language. So would you like to tell me something about how you know they have a language?
Ma'am, probably I can say that I just wondered it my own self. I haven't seen it like particularly over anywhere, but still I feel that they do have a language because that's how they will exchange their thoughts. That's how they will go for hunting and the daily activities and deeds they process and they function over. So that's why they do need to have a language of their own.
Yes, of course they do, but it is something that we probably do not comprehend. Whereas what we comprehend is what is our dialect first, which is the first language. And of course, we know that these are all local languages which change as the region changes. Then we have our second language. So basically, this is what sets us apart, that we can use words to communicate what we think, feel, and want to convey to someone else. That basically is language. So let's do an activity. If you happen to have a piece of paper with you, something that you don't really want to use, please grab it. And hold the paper in your hand. Ready? So now that you have the paper in your hand, I'd like you to close your eyes and follow my instructions. Has everybody closed their eyes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So now that you've closed your eyes and you have your paper in the hand, please fold it in half and tear the upper left-hand corner.
On the fold side or the other side?
Please follow through. Now that you're done with that, fold the paper in half and tear the lower right side corner. Now fold the paper in half and tear the upper right corner. All done? Now open your paper and can you display what the outcome is? Wow. So as you see, each of us has done the paper tearing, but none of us have a matching or a similar paper or the result, the outcome. What happened here? As we noticed, Vicky asked a question and I did not answer. So basically, I was trying to only give specific instructions and I did not allow questioning. Besides, the instructions that I gave were not very precise. So I did not specify whether we fold horizontally or vertically. So what is this when we are communicating?
Incomplete, no?
It is incomplete. Yes. So that is what happens when we are trying to convey something, but we are not very clear. So what basically is the process of learning a language? When we start or we are taught by making sounds. So we are asked to view how we voice or how we pucker our lips or how we shape our mouth. We do that, and that's how this is the start of noticing how we say a particular syllable, or then a word followed by a word, followed by then a series of words, followed by a series of sentences, and so on. Now, when we are doing this, in this process, are we ever glib always? And is it right from the start that we are that way? There are times when I have felt tongue-tied too. I'm sure each of us have. What do you think are the reasons? So basically, as we progress, I'm going to give you a lot of questions, a lot of food for thought. So if you feel you want to make a note of them for thinking about it later, please do. And if later you also want to communicate with me, by all means, we can do that. But going back to tongue-tied. So it's literally when we are thinking, but at times we are at a loss for words, or we have been affected by someone so intensely that we become tongue-tied. Are there any other instances where we have become tongue-tied? Anyone?
When we get surprised by something, because of that we are speechless and we run out of words, and hence there we become tongue-tied.
Yes. So surprised could be a negative surprise or sometimes even a positive surprise.
Also,
Yes, yes.
if we are speaking in a newly acquired tongue, for example, and we are thinking in our native language and we want to translate and we can't think of the word, that happens.
Yes,
So we know it, but we can't pull it up at the required time.
That's right. Yes, yes. So very true. Yes, Amrita, you'd like to say something?
When we don't know how to say something which will definitely hurt the other person, but we have to say it politely, so we think of different ways to say it.
Yes. So does that mean we are tongue-tied?
Maybe not.
In
No
the chat,
problem.
in the chat, someone wrote when we are embarrassed, Suzanne wrote, and Nirija wrote when we're nervous or very scared and get tongue.
Yes, yes, very true, very true. So speaking of tongue, as I was preparing, actually, when I was doing the presentation, I felt let me also add what we have connections when it comes to using the tongue. We become tongue-tied, but we also are familiar with tongue twisters. And I'm sure each of us has at least one which is our favorite. Do you have any?
The quintessential one, Betty got a bit of butter. Betty bought a bit of butter, but the butter was bitter. So Betty bought better butter to make the bitter butter better.
Yes, yes. Wow, you said it so well too. What about in our native languages? Does anyone know any in Hindi?
Yes, I know that.
Please do share.
चंदू के चाचा ने चंदू की चाची को चांदनी रात में चांदी के चम्मच से चटनी चटाई.
Yes, very true.
And Hamsini has her hand up.
Yes, please, Hamsini.
खड़क सिंह के खड़कने से खड़कती है खिड़कियां खिड़कियां के खड़कने से खड़कता है खड़क सिंह.
Super, super. Love that. Yes, Manish.
सार बीच नार है कि नार बीच सार की सारी ही नार है कि नार ही सार.
Ooh, that's nice. I'd like to know the meaning of that too later. That's a nice one. That's in which language?
Hindi.
What's that, Hindi? Manish, what language was that? Sorry?
It was Hindi.
Hindi.
Hindi. Okay.
Sari
Okay.
which nari hai, nari which sari.
Ah, okay, that way. So maybe because it was not clear. Right. So we've
Kannada.
had a, sorry?
And in Kannada, kage
Yes.
pukka, gudi pukka.
Ah, nice. That's nice too. I'm sure each of us have our favorites in our own language as well as in English. Speaking of tongue again, we all know about slips of the tongue. What are slips of the tongue? What happens? Why does it happen? Can anybody think and share?
For sure, the first thing I think of is when it's not my native language and I'm trying to think of the word in another language.
Right.
Tongue
Okay.
could slip. And Nirija wrote inattention.
Inattention. Or sometimes when we are in an urgency to speak and we are speaking very fast. So that is the time when we sometimes interchange or mix up words. So these are all part of when we are dealing with a language. Now, I think you can all see there is one word. Sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was saying that it's very funny that the psychology of language affects this very much, because a slip of a tongue could also be telling the truth at the wrong time to the wrong person in the wrong place.
True. So very well pointed out, Nivedita. So well. Fabulous. Fabulously shared. In fact, that's what I was going to go on to, because that literally is the crux of our conversation today. There is this word that you see on the screen right at the bottom right. So can anyone try and read it as quickly as possible?
Friskadikaphobia.
Because you are well versed in it and you are very familiar with the language. It's your native language. So probably it's far easier. What about a person who's learning a new language or a second or a third language?
Although I never have seen that word before.
By the way, this is a phobia of the number 13. Just for information's sake. So that brings us to what basically is psycholinguistics that I was talking about, and why I was talking about language, why not psycholinguistics. The bottom line is that psychology and language are so interconnected together. And when we combine them, basically, this is a new language, you can say, or a topic of concern, which is a study that combines both psychology, which is the study of human and animal behavior, and language, which is a list of these syntax and phonetics and the like. So what happens? Why psycholinguistics? Psycholinguistics basically is concerned with the human mind, because obviously when we speak a language, it does involve the internal as well as the voicing out. And when we are speaking a language, there are things happening in our brain. There is a lot of processing going on, not just when we are perceiving or comprehending, but also the in-between process before we really say out anything, which is why psycholinguistics as a subject is crucial to know and understand, and therefore give ideas of how to be different or how to understand when a person is learning a new language and how to help them learn it better. So as you can see here on the screen itself, it deals with comprehension, acquisition, and production. Like I said, why psycholinguistics? So it deals with both the input, which is perception and pattern recognition, and how you produce it, or the output, or how you represent what you learn. It also has the in-between process of the storing and the processing. So processing can be first the processing of what I can take in, and then the processing of what I understand, followed by the processing of what I really need to say. So I have to choose what kind of words I really want to give out. Of course, this is not something that all of us know. We all know this. So as I was saying, it is to do with comprehension, acquisition, and speech production. So we know that we are actually focusing on all the 4 skills over here: listening and reading, and then speaking and writing, and the in-between. So how do we learn the language? This has been studied throughout. Lots of experiments, lot of studies have been taking place, and people have been doing research and finding out about how language is acquired as a child and as a second language. So as I mentioned, the 4 skills of a language, which are the listening, reading, writing, speaking. What do you think comes first? We all know as children, we have learned a language, but what comes first? Is it listening? Listening, which is an input to us. And then is reading also an input?
Speaking?
Listen.
Sorry, you were saying something?
Lalita, were you saying something?
I said next speaking after listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's think back. What comes first? We listen to things, we get it all in as a child. Think of some child that you have seen, or your own children you have seen. How have you seen them perceive it? Have they understood? So for example, when you say milk, milk. So if you just say milk, or do you also show a glass? So when you point out to a particular object that this is milk, does that help, or just saying out the words helps?
Pointing at the objects will help.
Will help, yes. So our perception, the inputs help when they are verbal, as well as non-verbal. The actions, the signs that we can use to convey, so many gestures that we make, the expression, our eyes, the sadness of the face or the smile, they also add to how we convey meaning or a message to someone. So if there were a person who were to read something straight face, or if I were to deliver this presentation with a very straight face, or I'm not looking everywhere, not looking at everybody, what does it convey? It conveys that I'm focused only on a certain something, or that I am very stressed, or a lot many other things. Am I right?
Yeah.
So once we have the input of listening, what is the next step? Someone said speaking. Lalita said speaking. What about the other kind of input, which is reading? That comes at a later stage, not when we are still just learning a language. So I'm constantly using this as a comparison between learning a language as a first language or the native language and learning a second or a third language, which can be as an adult. How do we learn language as an adult? Yes, Vicky.
Well, one of the things that I often tell my students, I'm curious what you think about it, is I say that the more senses that you use, the more you can learn. So if you're, instead of just reading, because you're just using your eyes and, of course, your mind, but if you speak, if you read out loud, then you're speaking and you're also hearing yourself. And so what do you think about this idea of using more of your senses?
Yes, I totally agree with you, because when I used to assess students or speakers of other languages, when they would come to study English, the first thing we do is to assess them, what their current level of English is. And similarly, during the course of talking with them, I would tell them, so if at all you really want to get into the skin of the language, what do you need to do? You need to look for cues and clues and ways to help yourself. So when you say that we can use all our senses, that is definitely a must do, which helps ourselves in not just learning, but also being able to convey effectively. Yes, Nivedita.
So I was you're right, listening comes first and speaking comes later. But in this more advanced world, we are also constantly looking at messages. So although it's not reading in a conventional sense, the mind has noticed certain messages written. Of course, in deep rural pockets, in marginalized areas, this may not happen. But a modern child city is usually exposed to written messages also. And the mother is holding a book, the father is holding a newspaper, maybe some people are holding bills or cards. There is something delivered, there is something read, there is the phone, which is also a reading mechanism. So reading is also hitting on us, on our minds, and psychologically affecting us before as we are listening and speaking.
Yes, of course. Yes. So this would be more for children who are older enough to be able to read. Am I right, Nivedita?
No, it's not reading in a sense. They are not reading.
Yes. Okay.
They are just glancing and catching the picture.
Yes.
It's only image reading.
Yes.
They are not reading actually.
Yes.
So you are right. Because if you technically look at it, you're absolutely right. But they are looking at reading. They are looking at messages which are pictures.
Yes. Yes, true, very true. Yes. And that is the comprehension. So our initial input comes in the form of what we are told. So we listen, and what we see. So the reading, or not just the reading, but also, as you say, pictures. I totally agree with you.
Yes, Kavita wrote in the chat, watching, and I think that's what she meant, yeah.
Yes, yes, true. Okay, so when it comes to teaching English as a second, third, fourth language, probably, we all have heard this often used thing that we need to think in English in order to be able to converse better, or to understand or learn better. But research has also found that if we combine the home dialect, because there is processing which takes place, and then we try and convert it, we transform it, and then we try and convey the meaning. Similarly, when we are reading, taking in inputs, we try and understand it and then try and connect with what we have learned. So what research tells us is that it can add richness to the language. Maybe it is even poetic, because there are certain words which are understood by us in our dialect more than we would understand in the language that we are learning. So at times, if we do also take support of the home dialect, it does enhance learning, as against what was there earlier, that no, we need to ensure that we stick to. That's what we learned at school. No, think in English, talk in English, only do everything in English. But it has been increasingly realized that this helps too.
Is this what we call translanguaging?
Translanguaging.
Is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah. So what I thought was, in order to, since we are talking about psycholinguistics and things, so people who are learning a fourth language or a third language, let me just give you a few ideas of how you can enhance your listening. So we know that most of our time is spent communicating. And you can see the bifurcation or the diversion of how we really do it. Listening is a lot more than speaking, which is more than reading and more than writing. Nowadays, I think it is a little different. What do you think? Aren't we texting a lot of the time more than even speaking?
And
So
we
I
are
think
seeing the detrimental effects of not listening enough.
not listening.
In every sense.
Yes.
In the sense of language at the beginner level, and in the sense of relationships at the adult level.
Yes, yes, very true. So it has really caused a lot of downfall, basically, in communication as such, per se. No, just give me a moment, please. Okay, so when you are listening, what are the things you can do that will help you to listen better or to understand better? Can you think of any?
So when we're teaching English to, let's say, adult children, I mean, maybe adult children, not adult children is an oxymoron, but yeah, like slightly older children, if you're explaining, you want them to understand the nuances of the language, we would usually ask them to listen to the news or to listen to something, some piece of, mostly I usually tell them to listen to the news.
Yes.
And that too, like different channels. So you have the Indian English, then you have the American English, then you have the British English. So listen to all those accents and keep trying to, understand the way people speak the language. So
Yes.
listen in that sense. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So what are the challenges, basically? First and foremost, it could be probably the speaker talking quickly, or the speaker having a particular accent, which takes a time for us to comprehend. So what about the visual cues? So as Nivedita was saying, the phone, we have from earlier times been used to talking on the phone where we could not view someone. At that time, what did we do? How did we try and comprehend what was being conveyed to us? Did we try and visualize the actions the person is doing, or the expressions at that time, or the emotion that the person is facing or experiencing?
There
Is
are
it also
verbal cues, no? Sorry.
verbal cues? Yes, yes, of course.
And Irene wrote in the chat that interaction and engaging. And then Shubhangi wrote tone of voice, question mark.
Tone of voice, yes, yes, of course. The tone of voice does help, no doubt, and there's no question about it.
What about body language? Irene is asking.
Body language is when we are on the phone and we cannot see. How do we understand body language?
Yeah.
Yes. We also need to consider background noise. And because there's a lack of visual clues, there could possibly be limited vocabulary of the listener. It could also be a lack of knowledge on the topic, or it could be an inability on our part to be able to distinguish certain words or syllables or sounds. So there are a lot of factors that affect. What about when we are face to face or on a virtual medium? We can see, sometimes we cannot see. Oftentimes the teacher is the one who has sorry, if I use the word teacher, it is meant to be in a very respectful sense. And I also include educators here, anybody and everybody who is willing to impart information. So the teacher or the educator is the one who has the video on, and the others would have their video off. So is the teacher getting back information? Is there any feedback? Is a question mark. So how does a teacher manage to convey? Nivedita, you were saying something, you had raised your hand.
I was thinking of Helen Keller and the entire incident of her learning language. So there, that is a more complex kind of example to which you are giving.
Yes.
So yes, verbal cues, visual cues, if all are absent, the gestures, if all are absent, then it becomes even more complex.
I think that's why it's been so hard for teachers during this virtual, because and I've even asked my students, please put a picture on instead of your name, because I need to see faces.
Yes, yes, of course. And also not to forget the fact that when you are presenting something, the screen has been shared and is being occupied by just the presentation. So literally the teacher cannot really see others, whereas the others can see me. So again, there is some kind of hitch in how you can communicate. Anyway, when it comes to learning, to get back to that, some things that we can do is, let's say, for example, we can try and predict content. How can we do that? Imagine you've just turned on your TV. So you see someone wearing a suit in front of a large map with a symbol of sun, clouds, thunder. What do you imagine he's about to tell you?
Weather forecasting?
Yes, very much. So most likely it is going to be a weather forecast. So you can expect to hear words like sunny, windy, cloudy, clear, snow, rain, things of that sort, and also put together along with a lot of other words. But if you hear like it'll be a cold start to the day, or there'll be showers in the afternoon. So when you hear these, you pick up the crucial words, the cue words, and you try and understand. So this is probably what it could be. Now, how can you predict is, as I said, when you get the few words, or when you see what is there on the screen. What you can do is to help yourself learn better, how to listen better, is practice predicting content. So you can watch or listen to a recorded TV program or a clip from YouTube. Pause every few sentences and try to predict what will happen next, or what the speaker might say next. Make notes and then see if they tally with what comes up next. And remember one thing, when you're taking a listening test, when you get the paper, skim through the questions. Not that I'm giving you any new information, but this primarily helps people who are learning the fourth language, third language, and things like that. So a question beginning with how many on your paper. So you know that you can, when the audio content will play, you can look for or try and keep your ears open, focusing on what comes as quantity. Another thing that you can do is to listen for the gist. So you will hear a conversation, but then we know that when a sentence is spoken, sometimes in the process, there are words which will take you into different directions. So these are what cause you to lose interest. Even when you're listening, for example, if I speak a clear sentence in a straightforward manner, or if I use words in between which bring about different images or lead you into a different direction, you lose track of what I'm saying. So the content then does not really come across to you. So what you can do is try and listen to a gist. So again, look for a video which has subtitles on the topic. And using these titles, what you can do first is, without looking at the video as such, look only at the subtitles. And then try and predict what would happen. This also can be when you are viewing a film in a foreign language, a language that you don't know. So what you are trying to do is you see what is happening and you try and predict. I'm sure lots of you would have tried, as I do many a time, to go watch a foreign language movie. So I have gone to see Arabic movies because even though staying in the UAE, I haven't yet learned Arabic. I'm sorry to say that. But in the process of watching, we happen to gather the gist. How do we do it? What are the skills we can use to be able to do it? Sometimes what you can do is you can watch the video without the subtitles and then write down what you think you saw or what you understood, and then play it again with the subtitles on. And then you will see how correct or accurate you were.
I've heard that's I'm sorry for interrupting, but I've heard that that's a really good technique for practicing your listening skills.
Yes.
To listen first without any subtitles and listen and write down, and then listening, and it I think helps you become more autonomous learner also.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And when you want to learn new words, can you try and group them with other words which probably are in a similar context, and perhaps using mind maps would help? Another thing that we can do is we can try detecting signposts. What does signposts mean here? So just as there are traffic lights, these are the signposts for us to understand that we need to follow those particular things. What are the signposts in a text, in a body of text? So it's like, for example, I say, let's begin with. And we will be discussing 3 points. So firstly, secondly, lastly, sorry, somebody saying something? So as I was saying, first of all, and then we end with in summary or in conclusion, are these signposts. These are the things that you can try and make a list of, so that when you are trying to read a particular body of text, something which you feel probably consists of words which are very difficult. So look for these signposts and try and see if you can actually understand what was being said. Was it really this? And the 3 points, were these the points there? Yes, Vicky?
Well, besides the clusters of words, which is so good also, I just got to thinking, and I never thought of them as signposts, but really understanding your punctuation can also be like parentheses or colons, and those can also be sign points, and I hadn't thought of that. Sorry.
Yes. No, not at all. I mean, I'm glad you said that. So in your notebook, basically, yes, you were saying, Nivedita?
No, I was saying exactly what Vicky was saying, that there could be visual signposts, there could be verbal signposts, and there could be psychological signposts also. So there could be various different kinds of signposts, because like Vicky is saying, like there could be verbal signposts like first and second, but if a child doesn't know verbal signposts, perhaps the child knows visual signposts like full stop and capital letter. And if the child doesn't know visual signposts also, the child perhaps knows psychological signposts, for example, tone of voice and other things. So I love the signpost idea.
And Lalita wrote in the chat, everybody can just read it because it's a little bit long, but a suggestion that she made that they tried with some students. So,
oh wow, that's nice. I'd love to hear about it later. So in your notebook, basically, if you can try and group signpost phrases according to their functions, and you continue to add new expressions as you come across them, that probably would also be very helpful. Another thing that you can do is listen in for details, because we try and think of the gist basically. So we just pick out a few things, but can we try and look for details? It's like a detective taking a closer look at, for example, you've seen some buildings earlier and you saw a bird's eye view, like a superhero looking at things from the top. But when you try, after taking in the big picture, what you can do is you're looking for something specific. You can look for it and also reject anything that does not match what is on your list. So when listening for details, basically you are interested in a specific kind of information. Say maybe perhaps a number, a name, or an object. You can ignore anything that does not sound relevant to you. And this way you'll be able to narrow down your search in case you're looking for something and get the detail that you really need. So for example, if in a listening test, you are asked to write down the age of a person. When you're listening to the audio, listen for words like age, old, years, or the date of birth, things like that. These are the cues that can help you zero in or have your focus. And if it's a conversation, you might wait to hear someone beginning with a question. How old are you? Or how old is so-and-so? And how can you practice listening for details? First, you need to decide on the type of detailed information you want to practice listening on. And watch programs where you expect to get that information. For example, if you listen to a weather report to get details about the weather, or you can follow the sports news to find out the latest results, things like that. And like I said, if you are taking a test, as soon as you get the question paper, skim through the questions, underline the important words, decide what kind of detail you need in order to identify the listening text. What else can you do? Inferring meaning. So imagine you're a tourist in a country and you don't speak that language. You go to a restaurant and you get handed a bill. So as you go ahead to pay, you are handing out your credit card. But the person who's at the receiving end, he or she says something to you in their native language, which you don't understand, but you can understand the tone in which they say. It sounded apologetic. Can you infer some meaning from this? And what? Yes, Somi?
I can probably, I think that he might be trying to say that the credit card is not working, because that's how he'll be apologizing.
Yes, maybe that, or maybe that they do not accept credit cards and they need only cash. They only accept cash. That could also be there. So there are so many clues that we can use, and it also helps to have some prior knowledge about a situation to work out the meaning of what we hear. So can we infer the relationship between people from the words they use without having to find out directly? So let's listen to this conversation as I say it out. I don't have any audios today, which I generally do. So says Tom, "Did you do your homework?" And the other person says, "I did, sir, but the dog ate it." And Tom says, "That's a terrible excuse. You'll never pass your exams if you don't work harder." What do we infer if we were people who only spoke other languages and we know very little of English? So we pick out cue words like homework, exams, and we try and probably deduce that it is a conversation between a student and a teacher. So by using contextual clues and our knowledge of the world, we can work out what is being said, who's speaking, and what is taking place. Again, you can do the same thing. Pick up a YouTube clip, any popular television show, and rather than watch it, just listen to the dialogue. Maybe you can close your eyes and listen to it. How much can you infer? Can you understand what is taking place, who is talking, what their relationship is? Once you've done that, then again, listen to the clip a second time, but watch it too. Were your conclusions correct? So next time you hear a word you don't understand, try to guess its meaning using the context or situation to help you. But don't worry if you don't get it the first time. As with everything in life, remember, the more you practice, the better you'll get. Remember, these strategies, these are not standalone. These are very few and very minor tips or tricks that I have shared with you. While we can predict, or prediction can be used mostly as a pre-listening skill, there are others that we can use simultaneously to get the best results while listening. So let's do an activity. I'd like you to close your eyes and think of your favorite piece of music. Anything you've heard recently will do, or maybe an old favorite. Can you play it in your head? Sit back and try. Could anybody hear anything?
Yes, I could.
What could you hear?
It was the lyrics and like how she was singing it. So it was in her own voice. I could like hum it and I could know that what she's singing and that tone and that music, that background music, I could hear all the things.
So could you just hear, or were there images as well?
Like I have seen her video. So the way she goes on with the music, the expression that she makes with her hand. So I was able to have a glimpse of those expressions.
Yes, very true. Now, can you imagine a traffic jam in a major city? Can you hear honking horns echoing off buildings? Probably screeching tires. Maybe someone raising their voice and shouting. An angry man. Did this evoke just audio or visual images as well? So similar to this, we have thousands and thousands of auditory images which lie dormant in our memories. Church bells, claps of thunder, food being cooked, balloons. Think of any that you can. For most people, trying to recall them or evoking them is as easy as thinking about them. These mind sounds are auditory images. You can transform them into imagination just by giving them a new context. They are yet another gateway into the creative mind. Let me give you one instance. Just imagine there's a mile-wide meteor, but it lands with the sound of a baby's burp. Feels funny, doesn't it? Or imagine the sound of moaning wind. Our visual imagination will start wondering where it's coming from. Does it offer an image? The one that I got right now was one of a weather-beaten or a weathered corner of a cabin somewhere. Something is going on in the cabin. I'm listening again. What is it? It's a creaking, rocking chair. Someone's in there. Who is it? And a story begins to appear. If I want to make my story creepy, in order to thrill maybe a child who loves to be scared, I'll probably drop a skeleton and try to figure out how it got there. Or I can think of a Despicable Me story. Or I can alter the sound in the cabin to an IPL game on TV. Then the skeleton will disappear, the other things will disappear, and all we think of is a stadium with people around, maybe popcorn, lots of sound, hats flying, colors. Very different story. The point basically is, when dreaming up stories for your child, learning to listen to the story is a powerful way of creating it. And learning to trust your muse. Interesting word. It's the root word for music, amusement, and musings. Invoke your muse. Trust your muse. If you do, you might actually meet the Greek goddess, seated comfortably next to you in your auditory imagination, thumbing through a few visual images, waiting to guide you into a great story for your kid. Thank you.